The Hippo Incident. On March 9, 1996, on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, a 27-year-old wildlife tour guide named Paul Templer was doing what he did every single day, leading tourists down one of the most beautiful rivers in Africa. The job was peaceful. The scenery was stunning, Victoria Falls roared nearby, and the water was calm enough that a group of kayaks could glide through it without much drama. Paul was experienced. He knew this river like the back of his hand. He'd done this trip dozens of times. What he didn't know was that somewhere underneath the glittering surface of that river, a 4,000-pound bull hippopotamus was having an absolutely terrible day, and it was about to make that everyone else's problem. Without any warning, the hippo detonated out of the water directly underneath the kayak of Paul's apprentice guide, Evans Namasango, launching him and two tourists into the river. Now, most people would have stayed in their own kayak. Most people would have radioed for help. Most sensible people would have recognized that a 4,000-pound animal the size of a car was between them and their colleague. Paul Templer was not most people. He paddled directly toward his colleague, reached out his arm to grab him, and then everything went dark. There was a terrible, sulfurous smell, Paul later said, like rotten eggs, and a tremendous pressure against my chest. He was head first, up to his waist, inside a mouth of a hippopotamus. Let that process for a second. A fully grown adult man was inside another animal's mouth. The hippo's jaws are designed to bite through things. Their mouths can open nearly 150 degrees wide. A hippopotamus has a bite force of roughly 1,800 pounds per square inch, enough to bite a crocodile in half. And Paul was in there. The animal dragged him to the riverbed. His blood rose into the water in clouds around him. He had no idea how long he was down there. Time, he said, passes very slowly when you're inside a hippo's mouth. The hippo eventually spat him out. Paul felt a moment of relief. Then it attacked him again. Then again. By the time Paul was finally pulled to shore by another guide, he had 38 serious bite wounds across his body. His left arm had been stripped of its flesh from the elbow down, exposing the bone entirely. His lung was punctured. His Achilles tendon was torn clean out of his foot. It took 8 hours to get him to a hospital capable of treating him. His left arm was amputated. Evans Namasango, the apprentice guide Paul had gone for, was never found alive. His body was discovered 2 days later, over a kilometer downstream. Now, here's the thing about hippos that nobody talks about. They're not lions. They're not wolves. They're not the kind of animal that people think of when they imagine dangerous wildlife. They're big and round, and people put them in children's cartoons. Hippos kill an estimated 500 people every year in Africa. More than lions, more than leopards, more than any other large land animal on the continent. They're territorial, unpredictable, and capable of running at 19 miles per hour on land, despite the fact that they look like they should be physically incapable of that. And the worst part, Paul Templer survived, recovered, became a motivational speaker, and 2 years later, went back to lead another Zambezi expedition. When he drifted past the exact spot where the attack happened, a huge hippo surfaced directly beside his canoe. He's convinced it was the same one. The Shell Incident. In June of 1935, a 27-year-old man named Charles Garbutt was on a pleasure cruise off the coasts of Queensland, Australia, near the Whitsunday Islands. The weather was perfect. The water was clear. At some point, the boat docked near Hayman Island, and like any curious person near a beautiful beach, Charles wandered along the shoreline. And he found a shell. It was a cone-shaped shell, beautiful, smooth, patterned, the kind of thing you pick up because it's pretty, clean it off, and maybe take home as a souvenir. Totally normal beach activity. Charles picked up the shell and held it in his palm. The shell stung him. Not because it was sharp, but because it was alive. What Charles Garbutt had picked up was a live geography cone snail, Conus geographus, and it had just fired its venom into his hand through a mechanism that scientists describe as resembling a tiny, disposable hypodermic needle. The geography cone snail is considered one of the most venomous creatures on Earth. Its venom contains a cocktail of up to 100 different toxins, conotoxins, and researchers have calculated that the venom of a single specimen could theoretically kill up to 700 adult humans. There is no antidote. Charles would have felt his hand go numb almost immediately. 10 minutes later, his lips stiffened. 20 minutes in, his vision began to blur. 30 minutes after picking up that shell, his legs stopped working. Within an hour, he was unconscious. 5 hours after touching a shell on a beach, Charles Garbutt was dead. The shell that killed him was recovered and is still on display today at the Queensland Museum. What makes this particularly disturbing is the way the venom works. The conotoxins don't just shut one system down. They systematically dismantle the nervous system piece by piece. The paralysis moves progressively through the body, hands, then face, then legs, then chest, until the diaphragm stops working and breathing simply ceases. Researchers have described the experience as being bitten by a cobra while simultaneously eating fugu, the Japanese pufferfish that is itself one of the most lethally toxic creatures consumed by humans. The geography cone snail looks harmless. It lives in shallow tropical waters, it feeds on fish, which it paralyzes in seconds with its harpoon venom, and apparently, from the outside, it looks exactly like a beautiful souvenir you'd want to carry home. There have been at least 36 documented human fatalities from cone snail stings. Almost all of them died because they picked one up. The ocean has some very firm rules about touching things. The slug incident. In 2010 in Sydney, Australia, a group of teenagers were hanging out together doing what teenagers do, messing around, daring each other to do stupid things. One of them, a 19-year-old rugby player named Sam Ballard, was dared to eat a garden slug. He did it. It was a stupid dare. Harmless, his friends thought. Gross, but harmless. He didn't die immediately. What happened instead was a slow-moving catastrophe that took 8 years to fully play out. The slug Sam Ballard swallowed was infected with a rat lungworm, a parasitic roundworm called Anglostrongylus cantonensis. This parasite completes part of its life cycle inside rats, and rats pass its larvae through their feces. Slugs and snails eat the rat feces, and the larvae live inside them. When a human swallows an infected slug, the larvae enter the body and begin migrating. They are not equipped for a human host. They don't know what to do when they get there, so they travel. They burrow through the intestines. They work their way through the nervous system, and then they reach the brain. Sam was admitted to hospital shortly after, suffering from eosinophilic meningitis, a severe inflammation of the brain's lining caused by the worms working their way through the tissue. He remained in a coma for 420 days. When he finally woke, he could not move. The brain damage was extensive. He was quadriplegic. He experienced seizures. He required full-time care for the rest of his life, which was provided by his mother, Katie Ballard. Sam Ballard died in 2018, 8 years after eating that slug. He was 29 years old. The rat lungworm parasite has been found in over 30 countries. There's no specific treatment once the larvae reach the brain. Doctors can only try to manage the symptoms and wait. The cases are rare enough that most people have never heard of it. But every once in a while, someone eats something they shouldn't. Sam Ballard's story became a public health warning in Australia about the dangers of eating raw or undercooked snails, slugs, or produce that might have been contaminated by their slime. A garden slug, a dare, 8 years.